The One HSC Culture Summit back in February brought together about 100 of our most senior leaders across the company to discuss how we can improve safety and wellbeing for our people and to improve on our safety culture. The theme of the summit was Make It Personal. Today we'll hear from the personal stories of two people, and I'm sure these will both sort of resonate with each of you, and I'm sure you'll each have stories of your own as well. I ask that you listen to both Stuart and James's stories and consider some of the choices that were made and the impacts of those choices. Ask yourselves whether you give each of your choices the attention they need to ensure that you and your colleagues go home safely each day. This is obviously very important at this time of the year as we come up to Christmas, and given the distractions which this entire year has been about, people are quite naturally very distracted at this time of year, and obviously more so given the sort of difficult year, I guess, which it's been. I'd like to thank James for joining us, and I did have the pleasure of sort of meeting James at the summit back in February of this year. Before we hear from James, though, I'd like to introduce Stuart Inglis, who's the General Manager of our manufacturing and maintenance business, and Stuart's going to provide his own personal story. Thanks, Stewie. Over to you.
Thanks, Doug, and thank you for the opportunity to host this event. I've been asked to ask the question, why is safety important to you? And my little short presentation is going to explain why safety is important to me. And the reason that safety is important to me is because of my dad. When my dad was at work, the acceptable safety standards were a lot lower. As a result, he sustained quite a lot of injuries. So I would like to ensure that we create a much safer environment to work in than the one that he had to work in. My dad's story is not about one particular horrific injury. It's not about one particular choice he made, but it's about the choices that people and himself made that determined what was a healthy and safe place to work. A little bit about myself and my dad. We're from Northumberland. Northumberland, as you can see on the map on the left-hand side, is in the north of England. You can't get any further north in England. And it's between, I was from a town called Amble, you might see that on the right-hand side, which is halfway between Newcastle and the Scottish border. My dad started work at the age of 15, 1958. He began work in an underground colliery in Shulbottle. Him and his brother were the third generation to join that colliery. These are some pictures I've picked up. They're not of my dad. He didn't have a cameraman following him around his career, but these are the types of jobs that he did. His first job was taking the props. You see two guys on the right hand side there, putting a prop in place. His first job was carrying those props to the coal face, and then he got promoted to being a putter, where he pushed the wagon that you can see on the left hand side away from the face, back up to the shaft. As you can see, not very much personal protective equipment being worn. It was very dark, very confined working space, not fantastic conditions. At the age of 21, he got his first hospitalized injury. He was working very similar to these photographs that you can see here, and he was wearing a haversack, the bag that you can see on the right hand side there. The haversack got caught in the conveyor belt and he was dragged along the pit floor. He was stretchered out of the pit and was in hospital for he was off work for about 6 to 8 months. At the age of 23, he was using a piece of equipment very similar to the one on the right hand side there. He called it a bullhead drill. The condition, he was lying in an area which was 2 foot 3 inches high, and he had the bullhead drill laid across his lap, and he was trying to drill sideways into the coal face. The bit snagged in the coal face, spun the bullhead, and smashed into his knee. he had a knee replacement, and the operation was not a success. When the plaster was removed, the tension in the top of the kneecap was too high at the top, and pulled the kneecap 2 inches higher than where it should be. So at the age of 23, he could no longer bear weight on his knee unless it was straight, and he couldn't turn on that knee. The continued use of the bullnose drill just deteriorated his shoulder joint, and the socket just completely crumbled, and he had to have a shoulder replacement, which was, I understand it's normal practice, but it's now in reverse. So instead of the ball being on the arm side, the ball's on the body side. He's had a lot of injuries. He had to have a hip replacement. He's lost parts of 2 of his fingers. He's had hearing loss, lung issues, vibration white finger, and an ankle operation. At one point, he was actually trapped under a rock. The cutter that he was using saved his life, otherwise the rock would have crushed him. And they had to remove the rock to pull him out and take him out of the mine. So during my childhood, my dad spent a lot of time in Alnwick Hospital. So much so that every time we drove past Alnwick Hospital, we would wave at the window because he was so often there. Even when he was driving the car, we'd still wave at the window at Alnwick Hospital. He changed his career. He changed and had 9 years fishing. As you can see, the conditions weren't that fantastic then either. Very, very dangerous, not only on the boat, but actually the boat itself. The ship that you can see, or the boat that you can see on the bottom left-hand corner, is the Scarlet Cord. I watched that ship wash up against the rocks, knowing that my dad was also a fisherman. That boat was heading back into harbour and lost control and got washed up onto the rocks. Everyone was saved from the boat. There was no fatalities, but if that had happened further out at sea, that would have been a lot worse. After 9 years, my dad went back to the mines, but he went back to a much better mine. He went back to Ellington Colliery, a much bigger mine with much better machinery. And these are some actual photographs from Ellington Colliery. In fact, the person in the photograph is my Uncle Ken, actually. Machinery was better, as I said. Excuse me. However, he had another really bad injury. It was common practice to use a fire hose to clean down the conveyor belt. He was holding the fire hose when someone switched the water on. His feet were in a slippy situation. He was thrown backwards and hit his back on a steel girder. He was put into hospital with a broken vertebrae. Spent a long time off work as a result. So why is safety important to me? It's important because I know it affects the whole family. And that's why we need to reduce the number of injuries. We need to continually make the working environment safer. And maybe my next safety conversation, my next critical risk review or recognition award stops an accident of the future. So safety is important to me because of my dad. So that's my story. I'm going to hand over to James Wood, who has a very compelling story. James.
Thank you, Stuart. That was very interesting. Has your dad ever thought of writing a book, or have you ever thought of writing a book about your dad? Because I'd be interested in reading it. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share my story with you. A little bit of background about how I came to be here.
Thank you, James. Stuart, I'm going to come to you with a couple of questions, if you don't mind. You mentioned that obviously your dad had lots of injuries over the course of his career. How did that impact his home life and for you as a family? And before you answer, I'll just remind you that you're on mute.
Thanks, Mike. The obvious thing which I mentioned in the presentation was his absence. So as he recovered in hospital, obviously he wasn't around the house as much. His knee injury meant that he wasn't as mobile as he was beforehand. He couldn't really run. He would shuffle fast. And I guess just the constant worry that another rock's going to fall when he's down the pit, and that is not just understanding that danger was there all the time.
Can I just add to that, Stuart?
Please.
I've been lucky enough to have a family since my accident. I've got two boys now. My boys are both adults now, and they're good kids. But I can remember one particular incident when my oldest boy was about 6 or 7 years old, and he asked me to come out the front and kick the footy with him. And I mean, as a parent, we all want to be able to do these things with our kids. So, exactly what you're saying with your relationship with your dad. Imagine what it'd be like for those of you who've got kids, if your kid turns around and asks you to do something that you can't physically do with them. And that's where it really hit me that, that my situation was a little bit different.
Thanks, James, and thanks, Stuart. Stuart, I'll come to you with one final question, then I'll ask you to wrap us up. How did we spoke with James on his mental health since the accident? How did it affect your dad going through it? It feels like, I don't mean to laugh, but kind of consistently being injured over a long period of time rather than one major injury. How did that affect his mental health?
I really can't answer that question. To be honest, I'm not qualified to answer that question. But my dad just denies things. He just says, well, that's life. Get on with it. He had a mentality of stiff upper lip and just keep braying on. That's how he approached it. That's how he kept going to work every day. That was his role. That was his job. That was what he had to do for the family. I really can't answer the question around what was going on inside his head through all of that. I really don't know. Sorry. So with that failure of an answer, just like to wrap up and thank James Wood for coming and sharing his story. I'm sure a lot of people have and will get a lot from that story. So thank you very much, James. And thank you also for those that have dialed in, that have connected and listened through the session. So thank you for doing that. Look, I'd just like to wish you all Merry Christmas. Stay safe and make some clever choices. Thank you.